The ups and downs of the NBA season have hit the Chicago Bulls once again. It has been a tough stretch for the team at the United Center. They fall to the Brooklyn Nets, then the Golden State Warriors, and after a really valiant effort against the Boston Celtics, still number one in the Eastern Conference as of this recording. And of myself, Mike Mercado, is joined with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, here on the Sports Cubicle to talk a little bit about what has happened to the Chicago Bulls. And while the 3-game losing streak is a big deal and it is a talking point and it is something that we can call, quote unquote, measuring stick games, but the big news is coming out of Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball both being out the last few games. Zach LaVine, a very scary looking injury, but here we are, Marver, a few games in. We know the NBA, you're going to lose. You're going to have losing streaks unless you go 72-10. What are your thoughts about the Bulls this past weekend? What happened to Zach LaVine?
Well, I mean, he was out, but Ball was out yesterday, and they actually had a chance to win that Boston game. It was actually weird. I mean, it was an 8:30 local start, and it wasn't like a network game. So that confused me a little bit to begin with. But at the end of the game, Vukovic had a shot to win it, and then it went to the guy to tie it. number 11. I thought it would happen, but it didn't, and so 3 in a row. But I mean, even still, that record with only 14 losses ain't too bad. You know what I mean? So they're sort of hanging in there and surprising us all. But they have a special national game against the Grizzlies on Monday at 2:30. So hopefully they can turn it around. But they still seem to have the right sort of formula for winning. It's been interesting to see that now Desunda has come of, he had 21 points last night. He's come of age, even though he looks like he's about 12. So, but he was unbelievable at Illinois. So his contribution is very helpful at this point without Ball. So I think they still are going to be pretty tough. I just was worried in the East that they might eventually fall behind Milwaukee, but they look like a playoff team. I mean, I'm not so greedy to say they're going to be NBA finalists or anything, but I want to take one step at a time.
Right. And we know here in the NBA, it's fun to get ahead of yourself. It's been 7 years, if you're a sports fan, an NBA fan here in Chicago, a Bulls fan more specifically, that you've had these type of emotions. You have to remember what it is, the ebbs and flows of an NBA season. And you talked about it, the development that we've seen of Ayo Dosunmu. And while he looks like a 12-year-old, the one thing that really strikes me when I see him and like Patrick Williams last year is they look like grown men body-wise, though. And you realize that they're still going to grow into their NBA bodies. So you start thinking like the potential of what they can be. Kobe White's have a really nice bounce back since the injury. But I think this is what I want to bounce off of you, Marver. And it's been something I've been thinking about listening to local Chicago radio. And I think Chicago sports radio is some of the smartest sports radio you could find in the national spectrum. And one thing that I keep hearing is these matchup the Bulls have nightmare-wise against the Brooklyn Nets. Well, if you compare those Chicago Bulls to the Brooklyn Nets on any given night, I think the Bulls have a chance to win a series. But if Brooklyn is playing an A type of game where those three monsters, those three superstars, not all-stars, Marver, these are superstars, play the way they did, nobody's going to beat them. Who in the NBA can actually guard Giannis? Who in the NBA can actually guard Joel Embiid? And that's the question that people keep bringing up, that this is why the Bulls can't win a finals. Well, nobody in that case can win a finals if you put all those scenarios. I think for the Chicago Bulls and Bulls media and Bulls fandom, do you think we're going to have to learn what it is to remember a winning team, what it is to go through a playoff series, what it is to go through a playoff run? Do you think that muscle is a little rusty here in Chicago?
Historically in Chicago, it seems like you take baby steps. Even the teams, Jordan teams, they had to sort of sneak up on Detroit and then finally beat them. So it might require that again to sneak up in Milwaukee and finally beat them. Which seemed to be the big dog in the East based upon the fact they won the championship last year. But it's just, it's really wishful thinking, I believe, to think that they can, go through the East completely this year. With Philadelphia, Brooklyn, even Boston looks like a tough challenge. So to make the playoffs would be a nice first step, and then take one step at a time, I'd say. And they have enough youth that they're building for the future. It appears to me. I mean, they do have some seasoned players, but they do have enough youth that they could sustain this thing for a while.
And it all goes down to matchups in the NBA. You have it easy if you put yourself in a good position in the first round. Okay, you're able to advance. And then from there, if you see yourself in a tougher series against, let's say, Miami or Philadelphia, and you get past that, then you're in the conference finals. And at that point, all you're looking for is a bite at the apple. I'm with you. In the NBA, you have to go through those baby steps. We've seen it throughout history. Where it becomes interesting for the Chicago Bulls, it's what you mentioned, the way that the roster is put together. You do have Io, you do have Kobe, you do have Patrick Williams, but then you start thinking about the DeMar DeRozans, the Nikola Vucevic's, and where Zach LaVine kind of fits into that scheme. So they're in this weird, they could try to win now, but depending on the moves they make moving forward. And on that note, we've seen awesome play from Kobe. We've seen awesome play for Io. We're looking at a potential return from Patrick Williams. Are you in a sell now mode to try to win a championship? How aggressive? Because we've seen the management be aggressive. How aggressive are you, Marvelous, if you are in the head honcho chair of the Chicago Bulls roster? What are you willing to do if you think you get a player to get them over the top?
I don't want to sacrifice draft picks and too much of the youth, sacrifice the future for the present. I mean, it was sobering that they gave up 138 points to Brooklyn and Golden State in consecutive games, and basically got blown out by by 42 points. So there seemed to be a little weakness there. But those are that's Warriors are a top team in the West, and that's a top team in the East. So I mean, that sobers us to say, well, maybe they won't be champions this year. But there's still, they got the Grizzlies and then the Cavaliers and the Bucks. It's a tough stretch. The Magic, Thunder coming up, Raptors, Spurs. So there's a good stretch coming up where they're going to be tested by a lot of quality teams. So we'll see how it comes out, because say by the end of January, with these games I just mentioned, ending with the Trailblazers, if they can come out of this 3-game losing streak and show that they're back to the winning ways, I'll be a believer. Not to quote the Monkees, but
well, let me ask you, how much has this losing streak spoiled the mood of the Bulls? Have you lost confidence on this team, or are you able to, while being critical and understanding where they're at right now and putting this games into a bowl, knowing Zach LaVine hasn't been playing, Alex Caruso isn't there, Patrick Williams isn't there, Lonzo Ball wasn't there for Boston? Are you able to separate the two, or is this something you think the Bulls are going to have to fix moving forward? Or it has your mood dampened anyway with this roster, with this regime of Chicago Bulls, if you will?
Well, at 27-14, that far exceeds my expectations. I mean, they were winning 2 of every 3 games and still are 1 win away from that. If they win tomorrow, it would be exactly, a .667 percentage. So that's pretty impressive for a 41 game stretch, which what is it? It's essentially half the season. I mean, 54-28 wouldn't be too bad if they sustain that. So I'll take it, and I'm amazed at that record. I mean, it was 27-11, but 27-14 at the halfway point. I'll take it, and if they even not do quite as well, I mean, God forbid they were to go, like 25-16 or something, that he'd still have 50 wins. So it's very impressive, and I think that Billy Donovan seems to be the right guy for this job. And DeRozan was an amazing pickup. So I mean, congrats to them for doing that. I mean, the management here seems to have pulled a few of the right strings here. So and kudos to them. It looks like they're going to. I mean, unless they have a complete collapse, even if they went 20-20, they win 47 games, and they probably make the playoffs. A lot of times, teams in that conference barely above 500 make it. So I feel like they have an excellent chance of making the playoffs, which is the first step, advancing. I have mixed feelings about it, depending on the matchups, like we've talked about. With the big guys. I mean, the big dogs, like in Milwaukee, Philadelphia, the strong inside power teams. I mean, Vucevic can hold his own, but you're right. I mean, it would be nice to have another big banger, and we've talked about that before. But I don't want to sacrifice too much youth or a draft pick. I'd like to maybe be able to do that with maybe not even this year, and it's off-season free agent. I think they're going to be okay this year with what they've got, but to get over the top, maybe they do need a little bit more tweaking in the power forward position, I think.
And as we kind of head forward into some really fun and some cool news on the other end of this conversation, I think kind of just putting this recent stretch of Chicago Bulls basketball in perspective for me, I think a lot of this has to do with pressure due to the Chicago Bears. And I think what happened with the Bulls right now is a lot of fans are so excited. First of all, we know how much the city loves Bulls basketball, and we know how much the city loves a winner. And we do see that this team looks a little different than some other Bulls rosters because it's not just one great player with a bunch of really nice players and lovable players. These are 3 all-stars, 2 for sure all-stars, and a bunch of really good NBA players. But when you have the Bears pressure on this team now and everybody putting their hopes on them, not knowing if we're going to get baseball this summer, and we're still a few months away from March Madness, that you could feel that there was just a lot of anxiety for this Bulls team and Bulls fandom. But I do think you've said it. It's been a good run. It's been a fascinating way to see this roster be turned around it is and seeing the prospects develop that they have. It's the NBA. There's a growing process. Let's remember, if at the end of the day, I told you 6 months ago, this team has a chance to be a conference contender, and worst case scenario, they don't get to the conference finals, but they make a little playoff run. That means for the first time in his career, that's what Zach LaVine did. That means as a rookie, Ayo Dosunmu did that. That means in theory, if he's on your roster, Kobe White did that. Hopefully Patrick Williams coming back from injury doing that. Those guys are all under 21 years old. That is stuff that's invaluable on top of your soon-to-be max player and a veteran like DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic. So I'm with you, Marver. We can be critical, and we can also pick out these problems this Bulls roster has. But at this point, I think it's been a very successful season.